وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. The theme that we're going to start, inshallah, for the next maybe few weeks is going to be talking about treating parents and relatives, and then after that neighbors, with excellence. And the reason I think this is important is because, to a certain degree, living in societies that are somewhat disconnected, we end up losing that touch and losing the understanding, the proper understanding of what birr al-walidain and silat al-rahim and husn al-jiwar and all these concepts that the Prophet ﷺ, by the way, I don't want to say coined them, but that was a big part of his identity as a messenger, as a social reformist. Meaning, if you spoke to one of the Arab, whether from Quraysh or elsewhere, who didn't necessarily believe in him or did, and I said, can you explain to me what the Prophet ﷺ, what Muhammad is bringing, ﷺ, then they would talk obviously about Tawheed, for sure, that would be the first point. But then they would immediately kind of go into that. وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِبِرِّ آبَائِنَا وَصِلَةِ أَرْحَامِنَا وَحُسْنِ جِوَارِنَا. He points out these things. Even before, they don't even talk about prayer and sadaqah and siyam. Like maybe they talk about sadaqah, but they don't talk about prayer and siyam and hajj. They don't bring those things up because those are acts of worship that are very personal between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But these aren't. These are actually, this is what allows societies to prevail. These small concepts that we sometimes take for granted, or we don't spend enough time thinking about what they mean and how they can be practiced. And I'll narrate enough ahadith about these ideas, and I'll look at it from enough angles, and inshallah we'll try and talk about as many scenarios that are, because this is a question I get quite often. It's one of the topics that come up quite a bit, and what does birr actually mean? But before we actually talk about the birr, the hadith today is to actually define the word, define the concept. So, and I'm going to define it through two hadith. The first one, يروي الإمام مسلم في صحيحه عن النواس ابن سمعان رضي الله عنه قال سألت النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم عن البر والإثم. He said, Nawas ibn Sam'an, one of the known Sahaba, one of the great narrators of hadith, asked the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I asked him about birr and ithm. What do they mean? Honestly, it's a really good question. Some people act like it's, no, I don't think even most people know what they mean. What does birr mean? Not birr, what does birr mean? What is ithm? What is ithm? قل إنما حرم ربي الفواحش ما ظهر منها ما بطن والإثم والبغي. Out of the 5 things I talked about in Quran, one of them is ithm. And if you look at the translations, they vary. Oh, there's like 6 different translations. Sin is one of them, which is, a reasonable one. But what does it actually mean? It's a really important, actually it's a very profound question. So he asked the Prophet, what is birr and ithm? So this is what he answered, alayhi salatu wasalam. It's an amazing answer. قال البر حسن الخلق والإثم ما حاك في صدرك وكرهت أن يطلع عليه الناس. Al-birr is having good character, is the consistency of good character, of good choices, of good behavior, of good treatment. Ithm is what goes around within your chest, like what thoughts and ideas inside of you that you would hate for people to know you were thinking. That's what ithm is. Ithm are the things that we think about, that exist somewhere inside of us, that we would not be willing to share with people. Like, we'd be very embarrassed if someone saw, you thought that? Why would you thought that? Why would you think that? Like, how could you think, what was going on? That's what ithm is. So, alayhi salatu, instead of defining it religiously, which would be a 3-hour lecture he would have to give, alayhi salatu, to define birr and ithm religiously, he defined it personally. He said, look, there's a better, easier way to define these 2 terms. Just look at yourself. What is good character and behavior to you? That's birr. What are the things that you don't want people to know you ever thought of or intended to do or did, or the intent? That's what ithm is, and it's perfect, because this is exactly how we're supposed to deal with these things. To add to this hadith, because of another narration, يروي الإمام أحمد في مسنده بسند صحيح عن أبي ثعلبة قال سألت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عما يحل لي وما يحرم علي. Abu Tha'laba said, I asked the Prophet, what is halal and haram for me? This is like a bomb question. This is one of those questions that if someone comes and asks me after like a long day, I'm like, why? Do you have, why? I can't, how do I answer this question? What do you think this is? How do you think I'm not Rasul? I can't answer this question in 5 words. I have to sit you down and we have to talk for a couple of hours, and it's very tiring. So he asked the Prophet ﷺ a very difficult question. So he answered again, Utiya jawami al-kalim. He knew how to, he knew how to do it. He had that wisdom where he could take something very complex and just answer it with a couple of words, and you would walk away thinking about those words, and we would continue to think about them till the Day of Judgment, still not fully comprehend all of the angles. And this is what he said, قال البر, this is how he answered it, because he said, halal, what's halal for me, what's haram for me? So he answered it by defining bir and ithm for him, because bir is what is halal for you, and ithm is what is haram for you. قال البر ما سكنت إليه النفس واطمأن إليه القلب والإثم ما لم تسكن إليه النفس ولم يطمئن إليه القلب وإن أفتاك المفتون. The bir is that which brings the soul serenity, not satisfaction, not happiness, not excitement, no, serenity, where it brings it calmness, makes it feel fulfilled, and what brings the heart to ease. Again, he's using very specific, you asked a huge question, you're going to have to be very careful with the interpretation of the words he's going to use, because he's very accurate. He's very precise here. It's not about what makes you excited, makes you happy, what makes you, no, what brings you that peace and that serenity inside of you. That's what bir is. And ithm is what brings you the opposite. What makes you, maybe for the moment you get that high, that quick high, but after that you feel bad about yourself and you feel very unstable. You feel like, I don't know what that was about, and you almost feel dirty and you don't want to go back to doing it. You don't want to be a part of that. That's ithm. وَإِنْ أَفْتَاكَ الْمُفْتُونَ, even if the mufti tells you it's not. Even if you go to a mufti and he tells you it's fine, that's what, because again, he defines it for you. You know why I'm saying all this? Because when we talk about bir al-walidain, if you understood these 2 hadith, you understand that the definition is personal. It's personal. The concept is universal, the concept of excellence with your parents and your relatives. But the definition is going to be personal. I can't tell you what to do with your parents, just like you can't tell me, because your culture and background is different than mine. So what may be acceptable for me to do with my parents may not be acceptable for you, and vice versa. So it's a personal definition. So bir and ithm, when it comes to these relationships, is going to have some degree of a personal, there's going to be a personal aspect to it. And that's important. It's very important. Don't compare when we talk about these things. Look at your reality and then take the Prophet ﷺ's definition. He gave them to you. He told you. What do you consider good character? You know. Maybe different than what I consider a little bit. We come from a farming background. We're very vulgar and loud. That's how we are. To me, that's normal. I know other people who would find that extremely offensive if you speak that way, and I understand that, and I respect that. I can't carry them to my standards, and they can't carry me to theirs. There's a little bit of differences, just because of backgrounds. The Prophet ﷺ defined it personally in a beautiful way. This is the genius of Muhammad ﷺ. Wallahi, because no one, people listening to this didn't understand, but now when you look and you analyze and you go back, amazing. He chose personal definitions twice for these terms. For these terms specifically, because he knew how the ummah was going to expand and how we're going to need people to have a little bit of that personal touch. يروي الإمام مسلم في صحيحه عن النواس بن سمعان رضي الله عنه قال سألت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن البر والإثم فقال البر حسن الخلق والإثم ما حاك في صدرك وكرهت أن يطلع عليه الناس. صدق رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. سبحانك وبحمدك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا